$100 bill can look perfect and still be a lie. In December 1989,
A teller in Manila felt something off in a stack of Benjamins.
that tiny instinct cracked open one of the strangest money mysteries on Earth, the Supernote.
A counterfeit so good, it forced the US Secret Service to use microscopes to prove it was fake. If you've ever wondered how counterfeit cash slips past banks, casinos,
Even trained eyes,
or what happens when trust in money becomes a battlefield,
you're in the right place. Today, we'll follow the bill's trail from
from a quiet bank counter to international investigations,
secret networks.
and an arms race between printers and governments,
Stay with me, because the smallest flaw
can expose the biggest operation. The story breaks open in December 1989 at the Central Bank of the Philippines in Manila. A bundle of $100 bills is deposited and starts moving through routine processing.
A teller counts and inspects the notes the way tellers always do, quickly and calmly, with practiced hands.
The bills appear authentic. They pass the normal frontline tests, the kind designed to catch the average counterfeit.
And yet, one note feels strange.
It is not an obvious error. It is more like an instinct, the nagging sensation that something does not belong.
That tiny feeling is enough to trigger a quiet escalation.
The teller flags the bill. Supervisors take it seriously,
Management reviews it.
and instead of dismissing the concern, they do something rare. They send the note abroad for deeper analysis, because if a bill looks perfect but still feels wrong, it might be the most dangerous kind of fake.
The suspicious note travels to the United States and ends up at the US Secret Service headquarters in Washington, D.C.
This is where the work becomes forensic. The note is treated like evidence in a serious investigation, because that is exactly what it is.
It receives a case designation, C114342, and specialists begin examining it.
They use ultraviolet light to check how the note behaves under conditions that reveal security fibers and ink responses. They study the paper under magnification.
They compare texture and fiber patterns.
They test ink characteristics at different wavelengths of light. They look closely at microprinting and fine line detail because counterfeiters often fail where the human eye cannot easily detect.
And they pay special attention to the printing method itself, because real US currency is not simply printed in the everyday sense.
It is made using processes that give it a distinctive look and feel, including intaglio printing, which presses ink into the substrate under heavy pressure, leaving raised areas that can be felt with the fingers. For a while, the note seems to hold up frighteningly well.
The paper looks right.
The design is crisp. The feel is close to genuine.
That's what makes the case so unsettling.
If this note is fake, it was not made with cheap tools. It is made by someone who knows exactly what they are doing, someone with access to equipment and materials that normal counterfeiters never touch.
The team goes even deeper, inspecting the bill inch by inch, millimeter by millimeter, hunting for the tiniest inconsistencies.
Finally, the microscope work reveals two minuscule flaws. On the face of the note, there is a small gap to the right of the oval containing Benjamin Franklin's portrait, a gap that should not exist on the real bill.
Then, on the reverse, one lamppost shows a thicker, more defined line at its base than the genuine design typically displays.
Two tiny mistakes, almost invisible, but enough to classify the note as counterfeit. That conclusion should bring relief, but it does the opposite because this is not a counterfeit in the usual sense.
This is a counterfeit that almost passes as real.
It is sophisticated, consistent, and alarming in its precision. The note becomes known by a nickname that spreads quickly through investigative circles and media coverage.
It is called the Supernote, a term that captures the core fear. This thing is too good.
And once that is understood, the investigation shifts from simple detection to the harder question of origin. Who could produce a $100 bill that requires microscopes to expose?
The construction offers clues.
Experts focus on the production method and what it implies about capability. Currency quality printing often relies on specialized presses and techniques, including intaglio processes used for secure documents like banknotes and passports.
The equipment required is not common. It is expensive, heavy, and not something a typical print shop can hide.
That fact pushes investigators toward an uncomfortable theory. This may not be the work of an ordinary criminal gang.
It may be the work of a government-backed operation, one with access to secure printing technology, trained technicians, and protected facilities.
In the early stages, suspicions naturally drift toward hostile states and regions associated with black market networks. Different theories circulate because the first note feels like a new category of threat. But as more incidents emerge and patterns become visible, one country keeps appearing in the background of the story. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, better known as North Korea.
The alleged motive, often described, is economic desperation and the need for hard currency.
North Korea's economic trajectory has long been shaped by a centrally planned system built around state-owned industry and collective farms. For a time, the country maintained steady development, but it struggled to compete with the growth and industrialization of its southern neighbor. By the 1970s, South Korea was overtaking the North in economic output, and stagnation deepened over time. Then, the collapse of the Soviet bloc in the late 1980s and early 1990s hit North Korea hard.
Industrial systems that relied on imported energy and support began to falter.
Supply chains broke, manufacturing slowed. Hard currency became essential for buying parts, fuel, and goods from abroad, especially as international isolation increased. In that context, investigators and analysts describe a model of state-directed illicit activity in which the regime uses overseas networks to generate foreign currency through illegal means.
A key part of these allegations involves an organization widely referred to as Room 39,
also called Office 39 in many accounts. It is commonly described as a secretive party-linked structure formed in 1972. Tasked with generating foreign currency for the leadership, including through illicit ventures. Reports and analyses often connect this alleged apparatus to a range of revenue schemes. In the Supernote narrative, it becomes the shadowy name that appears whenever the question of funding an organization is raised. After the 1989 discovery, reports of high-quality counterfeit $100 bills began appearing in more places, and the cases became harder to ignore.
What draws attention is not only the quality of the bills, but also the recurring involvement of North Korean-linked personnel.
Several widely cited incidents include diplomatic or intelligence-adjacent figures found in possession of large quantities of counterfeit currency. In the mid-1990s, a case in Hong Kong involved North Korean diplomats found carrying hundreds of thousands of counterfeit $100 notes. Other cases follow in the same decade, including individuals traveling with North Korean documentation or linked to DPRK missions who were found with substantial amounts of similar counterfeits in places like Cambodia, Mongolia, and Russia. Each incident by itself could be dismissed as an isolated event.
Together, they suggest a pattern. These notes are traveling along channels that look like state routes, not random street distribution.
That pattern matters because diplomatic cover changes the logistics of crime. Diplomatic pouches and official travel can reduce scrutiny. Embassy staff can move through airports and borders with fewer searches. And even when caught, diplomatic complications can slow down investigations.
If a state wanted to quietly distribute counterfeit currency, the overseas footprint of diplomats and trade missions would be a tempting tool, at least in the early phases.
Defector testimony, whether fully trusted or debated, adds another layer to the story. In multiple accounts over the years, defectors describe a production site connected to counterfeit note printing, sometimes referred to as Printing Plant 62, located in the city of Pyeongtaek. These claims describe heavy security, controlled access, and specialized equipment. The details vary by source, but the theme remains the same. The alleged production environment resembles a protected state facility more than a criminal workshop.
Whether or not every detail is perfect, the broader logic holds.
To make a counterfeit this good, the operation would need strong technical knowledge, controlled materials, and specialized machinery. Real US currency paper is not ordinary paper.
Official sources describe it as a blend of 75% cotton and 25% linen, with embedded red and blue fibers that make imitation more difficult.
It is made specifically for the Bureau of Engraving and Printing by Crane Currency. and it is illegal for anyone else to possess the real currency paper. That means any counterfeiter faces an enormous challenge. The paper must feel and behave like real currency paper, even if it is not identical to it. Then the printing must replicate the fine line work, micro-printing, and raised texture created by intaglio processes. These requirements push the problem beyond casual crime. They demand organization, money, and expertise.
The United States does not just investigate.
It adapts. One major defensive strategy is to redesign currency to stay ahead of counterfeiters. In 1996, the Treasury introduced a major redesign of the $100 bill, the first big overhaul since 1929. The redesign added multiple new security features aimed at public authentication and machine detection. It included color-shifting ink in the lower right numeral that changes color when viewed from different angles. It added a portrait watermark visible when held to light.
It updated the security thread embedded in the note.
It expanded microprinting and fine line detail designed to break down when copied. The idea was to make counterfeiting more expensive, slower, and easier to detect in daily use. But the Supernote narrative becomes more disturbing because the counterfeiters appear to keep pace. In investigative language, this becomes a family of counterfeits, a branching set of related note variants that evolve as US security features change. New designations are assigned to track these versions over time. Each new variant suggests a cycle. The Treasury changes the design, then the counterfeiters reverse engineer the change, source materials, and release an updated fake into circulation.
It becomes a technical arms race that plays out across global finance.
The distribution strategy appears to change too. Early cases are often tied to individuals and diplomatic channels, but later reports describe a broader system involving trading companies, shipping routes, and partnerships with foreign criminal organizations. Macau becomes a recurring location in many accounts, partly because of its role as a gambling hub and financial center, and partly because casinos can be used to launder cash quickly. A person can walk into a casino with a stack of bills, gamble lightly, and cash out, leaving with clean money and a plausible paper trail. That is why high-quality counterfeits are so dangerous. They can move through environments designed to handle huge amounts of cash without anyone inspecting every bill under a microscope.
As US investigators focus on these pipelines, enforcement expands beyond simple seizures.
Large undercover operations are launched to identify distributors and dismantle networks. Two operations that became widely cited are Operation Royal Charm and Operation Smoking Dragon. Undercover agents infiltrate smuggling circles, pose as buyers, and arrange controlled purchases of counterfeit currency. They track logistics, they monitor meetings, they gather evidence of broader criminal activity, including trafficking in other contraband.
Over time, arrests accumulate.
Public reporting and official summaries describe at least 87 people arrested or indicted across the combined investigations, along with the seizure of millions of dollars in counterfeit currency. One element of these operations becomes famous because it sounds like fiction. Investigators needed to lure key suspects onto US soil in a controlled environment, where arrests could be made safely and decisively. So they staged a wedding, not a symbolic sting party, but an elaborate undercover wedding ruse aboard a luxury yacht along the New Jersey shore near Atlantic City. Invitations were produced.
The scenario was built to feel credible to targets accustomed to criminal theater.
Suspects arrived expecting celebration and opportunity. Instead, they walked into federal arrests. The tactic worked because it exploited a basic truth about organized crime networks. People trust rituals and introductions, especially when money is involved. Meanwhile, the United States also applies pressure through the global financial system. This is where the story shifts from police work to economic warfare. Investigators identify points where counterfeit proceeds and illicit funds are laundered.
In 2005, the US Treasury designated Banco Delta Asia in Macau as a primary money laundering concern under Section 311 of the USA Patriot Act, citing its role in facilitating illicit financial activity connected to North Korea. The designation was not merely symbolic.
It warned financial institutions worldwide that doing business with that bank carried serious risk. It also pushed American companies and financial entities to cut ties. The broader effect, described in many analyses, was chilling. Banks across Asia did not want to be associated with North Korean transactions. They began distancing themselves quickly. For a regime that depends on foreign currency access, losing banking relationships is more damaging than losing a shipment of counterfeit notes. This is one reason the Supernote story appears to fade over time. Even a state-backed operation has to weigh costs and benefits.
Producing high-grade counterfeit currency requires equipment, materials, training, and secure distribution routes.
If law enforcement pressure rises and financial channels shrink, the risk increases and the payoff shrinks. That does not mean the operation disappears overnight, nor does it mean every Supernote already in circulation is found quickly, but it does mean the environment becomes hostile. Currency design continues to evolve. In 2013, the United States introduced a redesigned $100 note, the first major redesign since 1996. The new design included additional features to make quick authentication easier for the public and harder for counterfeiters to reproduce. Two headline features were a three-dimensional security ribbon and a color-shifting bell in an inkwell. The goal was to create features that could be checked in seconds by tilting the note and looking for specific movement and color change.
Official messaging emphasized that people do not need special tools to quickly verify the new note.
Over time, as new security features spread through circulation, the barrier for producing convincing counterfeits rises again. In the Supernote narrative, one of the most striking developments is the apparent decline in new variants after 2008, along with a reported decrease in Supernote discoveries in later years. That trend is often framed as the outcome of sustained pressure, redesigned bills, deeper enforcement operations, and aggressive financial measures. But there is an unsettling ambiguity built into that decline. A drop in detections can mean the problem is shrinking, or it can mean the counterfeit has become harder to detect. Both interpretations are possible, and the uncertainty keeps the Supernote story from ending cleanly. The modern era adds another twist.
As money becomes more digital, the easiest way to steal money changes.
It becomes less about paper and more about networks, credentials, and vulnerabilities. In that shift, North Korea's alleged illicit revenue generation is often described as moving into cyber operations. A major case, cited in this context, is the Bangladesh bank cyber heist in February 2016. Hackers issued dozens of fraudulent instructions through the SWIFT network, attempting to move close to $1 billion from Bangladesh bank's account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Many transfers were blocked, partly because suspicions were raised by an error in one instruction and systems flagged transactions for review. A portion of the attempted theft succeeded. $101 million was transferred in successful transactions, with $81 million traced into the Philippines and $20 million into Sri Lanka, with the Sri Lanka funds later recovered. The incident became a global warning about financial infrastructure and the human and technical weaknesses that attackers can exploit.
Then, the crypto era delivers another headline.
In March 2022, the Ronin network, tied to the Axie Infinity ecosystem, was hacked in a theft valued at roughly $620 million. US government advisories and public reporting described North Korea-linked actors, including groups often referred to as Lazarus and APT-38, as targeting blockchain and cryptocurrency firms using spear phishing and malware to steal and launder funds. Reports also describe US authorities attributing the Ronin theft to North Korea-linked hackers in official statements. The details matter because they show the evolution of the same underlying strategy. When sanctions and isolation box in a regime, it searches for whatever channel still produces revenue. If paper counterfeiting becomes too risky, the effort can shift to digital theft, where targets are global and operations can be run from behind screens. That shift does not erase the Supernote story, it reframes it.
The Supernote becomes a chapter in a longer playbook, one about survival, hard currency, and operating in the shadows.
It also becomes a reminder of how fragile confidence can be. Money works because people trust it. A $100 bill is not valuable because of the cotton and linen. It is valuable because people believe it represents value. If a counterfeit can closely imitate the symbols and features of trust, it threatens more than just individual transactions. It threatens the belief system that underpins international commerce. And yet, the Supernote story still resists a clean conclusion. One possibility is that the operation ended because the economics no longer worked.
The bills became harder to copy, laundering became harder to hide, and the cost outweighed the profit.
Another possibility is more unsettling. The operation could have continued, and the counterfeits could have improved beyond the reach of ordinary detection. In that scenario, the absence of discoveries would not be comforting. It would be camouflage. The world would not know the bills are there because they would no longer stand out as suspicious. That is why the smallest details matter so much in this story. A tiny gap near a portrait oval, a slightly heavy line at the base of a lamppost.
Minuscule choices that revealed a forgery that looked flawless in the hand.
It is also why modern security advice always returns to the same simple routine. Feel the paper, tilt the note, check it under the light. Look closely at the features designed to move, shift, and reveal themselves. Those steps exist because at some point experts learned the hard way that looks real is not enough.